New Year's Night in Monte Carlo. A Hercule Poirot Mystery Part 1. Arrival among the lights, the train slid into Monte Carlo with a whisper rather than a roar, as though even steel and steam understood the necessity of discretion in a place devoted to elegance. Hercule Poirot stepped down onto the platform with meticulous care, adjusting his immaculate mustache before allowing himself the faintest smile of approval. Monte Carlo, he reflected, was a city that wore its sins like diamonds, brilliant, cold, and carefully displayed. It was New Year's Eve. The air carried the faint perfume of the sea mixed with cigar smoke and expensive cologne. Everywhere there was movement, silk dresses brushing marble floors, polished shoes clicking with purpose, laughter that sounded just a shade too loud. The city glittered as if determined to blind its visitors before midnight struck. Poirot's valet, Georges, hovered anxiously behind him. "Everything is prepared, monsieur," he said. "Your suite overlooks the harbor. And tonight, of course, the casino." Yes, Poirot interrupted gently. "One does not come to Monte Carlo to admire the wallpaper." A black automobile carried them up the winding roads. Toward the Hotel de Paris. Poirot observed the passing scenery with interest, not the palm trees or the Mediterranean glow, but the people. A woman staring too long at her reflection in the window. A man counting invisible money with nervous fingers. Anticipation, greed, hope, despair. Monte Carlo distilled human emotion into its purest form. And where emotion gathered, crime was never far behind. That evening, the Casino de Monte-Carlo shimmered like a jewel box flung open for the world to admire. Chandeliers spilled golden light onto gaming tables where fortunes changed hands with a flick of the wrist. The orchestra played softly, as though aware it was merely a backdrop to greater dramas. Poirot entered precisely at 9 o'clock. He was immediately aware, how could he not be, that he was being observed. Fame, Poirot knew, was a tiresome companion. A tall man in a dinner jacket leaned toward his companion and whispered. A woman paused mid-step, her eyes widening with recognition. Poirot acknowledged them all with polite nods. The practiced grace of a man accustomed to admiration. It was then that he noticed her. She stood near the roulette tables, dressed in midnight blue, her posture rigid despite the elegance of her gown. Her face was beautiful in a sharp, intelligent way, but it was her eyes that held Poirot's attention. They were not watching the game. They were watching the room. She was afraid. Poirot filed the observation away. Within minutes, he was approached by Monsieur Etienne Morel, a senior casino official whose smile was too fixed to be sincere. "Monsieur Poirot," Morel said, bowing slightly. "What an honor. Monte Carlo is delighted by your presence." "The pleasure is mutual," Poirot replied, "though I hope I am not here professionally." Morel laughed a brittle sound. "Of course not. You are here to enjoy the festivities." Poirot raised an eyebrow. Naturally. They both knew it was a lie. The invited guests for the New Year's Eve gala were a carefully curated collection of wealth, influence, and scandal. Poirot made it his business to observe them all. There was Sir Julian Ashcombe, an English industrialist with a booming laugh and eyes that never stopped calculating. He played baccarat aggressively, as though daring the cards to defy him. Beside him sat Madame Lucienne Valois, a French widow rumored to have inherited more secrets than money. Her diamonds caught the light, but her smile never reached her eyes. At the bar stood Anton Markovic, a Yugoslav financier with a scar along his jaw and a reputation that suggested violence lay just beneath his tailored exterior. And then there was Isabella de Luca, the woman in blue. Poirot noticed how conversations shifted when she passed, how voices lowered, how glances followed her with curiosity tinged with something darker. She was important, or dangerous, possibly both. At 10:30, Poirot took his seat at a quiet roulette table. He placed a modest bet, not for profit, but for observation. People revealed themselves best when they believed chance was in control. Across the table, Sir Julian wiped sweat from his brow. "Rotten luck tonight," he muttered. "Luck," Poirot said mildly, "is a most convenient excuse." Sir Julian laughed. "You sound like my accountant." No, Poirot replied. I sound like a man who understands human nature. The wheel spun black. 20-6. Sir Julian cursed softly. Poirot did not smile as the evening progressed. The tension grew not unlike the tightening of a violin string. The orchestra shifted to livelier music. Champagne flowed freely. Laughter became louder, more desperate. Poirot noticed small things. Madame Valois slipping something into her clutch and glancing over her shoulder. Markovic leaving the gaming floor twice to make phone calls. His voice low and urgent. Isabella de Luca standing alone now. Her earlier companion nowhere to be seen. At 11:45. She approached Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, she said. Her accent Italian, her voice controlled but strained. May I speak with you? Poirot rose immediately. But of course, mademoiselle. They moved to a quieter corner near the terrace doors, where the sea air cooled the heat of the room. You are in danger, she said without preamble. Poirot studied her face carefully. I assure you, not you, she interrupted. Someone else, tonight. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Ooh, mademoiselle. She hesitated. Before she could answer, a burst of applause erupted from the main hall. Someone had won big. The crowd surged, momentarily separating them. When Poirot turned back, Isabella de Luca was gone. The clock above the main hall chimed once. 11:59. Poirot felt it then, a familiar tightening in his chest. The instinct that had guided him through decades of murder and deceit. Something was about to happen. He scanned the room rapidly. Sir Julian was no longer at his table. Madame Valois looked pale, her hand trembling as she lifted her glass. Markovic stood near the private gaming rooms, his expression unreadable. The lights dimmed slightly. The orchestra slowed. The crowd began the countdown. 10, 9, 8. Poirot's gaze fixed on the private salon doors. 7, 6. A sudden sound, a sharp, unmistakable crack, cut through the music. Not loud, but final. For a fraction of a second, silence reigned. Then screams. Part 2. The silence after midnight for a Tissan moment, no longer than the blink of an eye. The Casino de Monte-Carlo forgot how to breathe. The orchestra faltered, a violin screeching into discord before collapsing into silence. Champagne glasses froze mid-air. Then the screams came sharp, panicked, multiplying like cracks in ice. Poirot did not move. He had learned long ago that chaos revealed nothing to those who rushed into it. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the private salon doors from which the sound had come. A single truth settled calmly in his mind. A gunshot is never accidental. Murder? Someone cried. Mon Dieu, lock the doors. Security guards pushed through the crowd, their faces pale beneath professional composure. Monsieur Etienne Morel appeared at Poirot's side, his earlier polished confidence utterly gone. Monsieur Poirot, he stammered. There has been an incident. Poirot inclined his head. Yes, I believe that is evident. Morel stared at him, momentarily startled by the detective's calm. Please come quickly. Poirot followed without haste. The private salon was a room designed for discretion. Thick carpets, velvet drapes, and a single baccarat table beneath a crystal lamp. It smelled faintly of cigar smoke and gunpowder. A man lay slumped in an armchair. Sir Julian Ashcombe. His dinner jacket was immaculate, save for a dark spreading stain over his chest. His eyes were open, fixed in an expression of mild surprise, as though death had interrupted a calculation mid-thought. A revolver lay on the carpet a few feet away. Poirot approached slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. No one has touched anything? He asked. Morel shook his head. I ordered the room sealed immediately. Good, Poirot murmured. He bent slightly, examining the body without touching it. The shot had been fired at close range, no more than a few feet. Sir Julian's right hand was relaxed, empty. Poirot straightened. This was not suicide, he said calmly. Morel swallowed. How can you be so certain? Poirot gestured delicately toward the revolver. The angle is wrong, the placement theatrical. And Sir Julian Ashcombe was not a man who surrendered control, not of his fortune, and certainly not of his life. Morel exhaled shakily. "The police are on their way." "Of course," Poirot said. "But until they arrive, we must rely on order." "And order, monsieur, begins with observation." Asterisk. The guests had been escorted into the grand hall, where murmurs buzzed like disturbed insects. Some wept. Others whispered urgently. A few Poirot noticed, watched with a little too much interest that Isabella de Luca was among them. She stood apart from the others, her face drained of color, one hand pressed to her mouth. When her eyes met Poirot's, something passed between them. Fear, yes, but also recognition. She knew. Poirot made a mental note. Inspector Henry Valette arrived within minutes. A compact man with sharp eyes and neatly trimmed mustache. He greeted Poirot with a mixture of relief and irritation. "Monsieur Poirot," he said. "I should have known." Poirot smiled faintly. "Chance, my friend. Or perhaps destiny." Valette gestured toward the sealed salon. Sir Julian Ashcombe. Shot through the heart. No witnesses inside the room. "Ah," Poirot said. "But witnesses are everywhere, Inspector. They simply do not yet know what they have seen." Valette sighed. "You intend to involve yourself." "I intend," Poirot replied gently, "to prevent you from arresting the wrong person." The inspector began with the obvious. Who had access to the private salons? Valette asked Morel. "Several high-rolling guests," Morel replied. "Sir Julian included. Madame Valois, Mr. Markovic, and," he hesitated, "Miss de Luca." Valette's eyes sharpened. "Bring them forward." Madame Lucienne Valois approached first, her diamonds trembling against her throat. "This is dreadful," she said softly. "Simply dreadful. Where were you at midnight, madame?" Valette asked. "At the bar," she replied smoothly. "Many people saw me." Poirot observed her hands. They were steady now, but had not been earlier. "And before midnight?" Poirot asked. She hesitated, just a fraction. "I was walking, enjoying the atmosphere." "Alone?" Poirot pressed. "Yes," she said quickly. Too quickly. Poirot smiled politely. Anton Markovic was next. "I heard the shot," he said flatly. "I was near the private rooms, but not inside." "Why were you there?" Valette asked. Markovic's scar twitched as he smiled. "Business." Poirot tilted his head. "At midnight, monsieur?" Markovic's eyes flicked toward Poirot. "Time is irrelevant to business." "Ah," Poirot said, "but not to murder." Finally, Isabella de Luca stepped forward. She seemed to gather herself before speaking, as though bracing against an invisible wind. "I was on the gaming floor," she said. "Near the roulette tables." Poirot watched her closely. "And earlier, mademoiselle, when you spoke with me?" Her eyes widened slightly. "I was afraid," she admitted. Sir Julian had threatened someone. I did not know whom to trust. Valette leaned forward. "Threatened how?" She closed her eyes briefly. "He was involved in something illegal. Someone wanted out. He said they would not live to see the new year." A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And did you know who that someone was?" Isabella hesitated. "No," she said. Poirot did not believe her. As the questioning continued. Poirot's mind worked quietly, assembling fragments. Sir Julian's sudden disappearance from the gaming table. Madame Valois' trembling hands. Markovic's convenient proximity. Isabella's warning cut short by the crowd. And then there was the revolver. Poirot turned to Valette. "Inspector," he said softly, "may I ask, has the weapon been identified?" Valette nodded. "Registered to Sir Julian." Poirot smiled sadly. "Of course it is. What do you mean?" Poirot gestured toward the crowd. "The murderer wished us to believe this was simple. A man alone. A weapon of his own. But murder is never simple, only people wish it to be." Valette frowned. "You have a theory?" Poirot's eyes drifted to the clock above the hall, now reading 12:20. "I have," he said. "But first, Inspector, I must ask a question no one has yet considered. And that is?" Poirot's voice dropped. "Who ensured that Sir Julian would be alone at the precise moment the year changed?" Valette stiffened. Across the room, Isabella de Luca swayed slightly. As though the question had struck her physically, Poirot noticed, and he understood that the murder was not the beginning of the mystery, but its midpoint. Part 3. The psychology of the crowd. Inspector Villette ordered the casino sealed. The great doors of the Casino de Monte-Carlo were closed with a solemn finality that sent a ripple of unease through the assembled guests. What had been, only minutes earlier, a temple of pleasure now felt like a gilded prison. The chandeliers still glowed, the carpets still gleamed, but the air had changed. Suspicion had entered, and with it, fear. Hercule Poirot welcomed the change. Fear, he knew, was most revealing when it was forced to wait. "Ladies and gentlemen," Villette announced, "until this matter is resolved, no one leaves." A chorus of protests rose immediately. "This is outrageous. I have diplomatic immunity. My train leaves at dawn." Poirot watched them all with interest. Panic took many forms. Some became loud, others very quiet. Isabella de Luca said nothing. Poirot requested permission to walk among the guests. Villette hesitated. "You are not officially." Poirot raised a hand gently. "Inspector, you may question with authority. I question with understanding. The murderer will not fear you yet, but he or she will fear me." Villette sighed. "Very well, but do not interfere." Poirot smiled. "I never do." He began where all good investigations should, not with facts, but with people. Near the bar, Madame Lucienne Valois sat alone, nursing a glass of champagne she had not touched. Poirot approached her with delicate courtesy. "Madame," he said, "may I join you?" She looked up sharply, then forced a smile. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. Such dreadful business." "Yes," Poirot agreed. "Dreadful and yet fascinating." She stiffened. "Fascinating?" "The way people behave," Poirot clarified. "Under pressure." She laughed nervously. "I behave perfectly well under pressure. Do you?" Poirot asked softly. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. "You were once very close to Sir Julian." Poirot continued. "Professionally, yes, but also personally." Her eyes flashed. "Gossip?" "Truth often masquerades as gossip," Poirot replied. "You invested heavily in his ventures. Ventures that were not entirely legal." Her face paled. "I lost money," she said sharply. "That is all." "But not your freedom," Poirot said. "Sir Julian held certain documents. Documents that could destroy you." Madame Valois stared at him, breath shallow. "You are accusing me?" "No," Poirot said gently. "I am understanding you." She turned away, her composure cracking for the first time. "I did not kill him," she whispered. "But I am not sorry he is dead." Poirot nodded. "That is an important distinction." Across the hall, Anton Markovic stood with arms crossed, watching everything. He did not pace. He did not fidget. That alone made him dangerous. Poirot approached. "Monsieur Markovic," he said pleasantly, "you are a man who dislikes disorder." Markovic's eyes narrowed. "I dislike stupidity." "Ah," Poirot said. "Then this murder must offend you greatly." Markovic snorted. "Ashcombe was careless. Careless men die." Poirot studied him. "You dealt with him in weapons, did you not?" Markovic did not deny it. "Among other things. And recently he attempted to cheat you." A slow smile spread across Markovic's face. "He attempted many foolish things. Did you threaten him?" Poirot asked. "Yes," Markovic said calmly. Several nearby guests gasped. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You admit this freely?" "Threats are not murder," Markovic replied. "And I do not kill without purpose." Poirot leaned closer. "You were seen near the private salons." "I was," Markovic said. "But I was not alone." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "With whom?" Markovic glanced, just briefly, toward Isabella de Luca. Poirot followed the look. Isabella stood near the terrace doors, staring out at the dark sea. Fireworks from distant celebrations burst faintly over the water celebrations. She would never forget. Poirot joined her. Quietly, "You did not tell the inspector everything." He said that. She flinched but did not turn. "I tried to warn you," she said. You did not listen. I listened very carefully, Poirot replied. But you were interrupted. She laughed bitterly. By a murder. No, Poirot corrected. By a countdown. She faced him then, tears shining in her eyes. Sir Julian was my uncle, she said. Not by blood, but he raised me. He taught me everything. And then he used me. Poirot nodded. To move money. To deliver messages. And to betray people, she whispered. When I refused, he threatened to expose me. To ruin me. And someone else, Poirot added. Someone who wanted out. She swallowed hard. Yes. Who? Poirot asked gently, before she could answer. Inspector Valliet approached briskly. Monsieur Poirot, he said, we have found something. Asterisk in the private salon. A small discovery awaited them. A champagne flute lay overturned near the armchair. Inside it, barely visible, was a faint residue. Poison? Valette asked. Poirot shook his head. No, a sedative. Mild but effective. Valette frowned. Then why shoot him? Poirot smiled thinly. Because the sedative was not meant for Sir Julian. Silence fell. You see, Poirot continued, someone intended to incapacitate, not kill. But plans change. Valette stared at the glass. Who was meant to drink it? Poirot's gaze drifted back toward the grand hall. The person Sir Julian intended to meet privately at midnight, he said. The person who ensured he would be alone. At that precise moment, a shout echoed from the hall. Monsieur Inspector. A guard rushed in, breathless. We have found a guest attempting to destroy documents in the ladies' powder room. Valette stiffened. Who? The guard hesitated. Madame Valois. Poirot closed his eyes briefly. The web was tightening, but the spider was not yet revealed. Because Poirot knew one thing with absolute certainty. Madame Valois was hiding something, but she was not the murderer. Part 4. The way of secrets. Madame Lucienne Valois sat very straight in the small anteroom off the casino floor, her elegance now rigid, as though it were the only thing holding her together. A torn envelope lay on the table before her. Several papers, half burned, edges blackened, had been rescued from the waste bin by a vigilant attendant. Inspector Valliet stood over her, his expression stern. Destroying evidence is a serious matter. Madame, he said. Madame Valois lifted her chin. Those papers were personal. Poirot examined the fragments with interest. Personal, he repeated softly, but also financial. Offshore accounts, shell companies, and Sir Julian Ashcombe's signature. Her eyes flickered. He forced me, she said. Years ago, I invested in his enterprises. When I wished to withdraw, he reminded me, most unkindly, that the law would not be on my side. Valette crossed his arms. And tonight? Tonight, she said bitterly, I learned he was dead. I panicked. Poirot inclined his head. A very human reaction. Valette frowned. You admit motive? Yes, Madame Valois snapped. Motive, opportunity, resentment. Take your pick. But I did not kill him. Poirot met her gaze. No, you did not. Valette turned sharply. How can you be so sure? Poirot gestured to the papers. Because Madame feared exposure. A murderer would have ensured silence, permanent silence, long before tonight. Madame Valois closed her eyes in relief. But, Poirot continued, you know something else. Something you have not yet told us. Her shoulders sagged. There was a meeting arranged, she said quietly. Sir Julian intended to meet someone in the private salon at midnight. He told me so, boasting, as he always did. Did he say who? Valette demanded. No, she replied. But he was amused. He said the person believed they were coming to negotiate. Poirot's eyes gleamed. While in truth, he intended to destroy them, Madame Valois whispered. The implication settled heavily. Poirot returned to the grand hall, his thoughts moving with methodical precision. A planned meeting. A sedative and a champagne flute. A gunshot at the exact moment of the new year. This was not a crime of passion, it was. Choreography. Anton Markovic was intercepted near the gaming tables, speaking in hushed tones to a security officer. Poirot approached as the officer withdrew. You have been busy, monsieur, Poirot observed. Markovic shrugged. I dislike being confined. You dislike losing control, Poirot corrected. Markovic smiled thinly. You are perceptive. Tell me, Poirot said. Did Sir Julian owe you money or his life? Markovic's smile vanished. He owed me both, he said coldly. But I did not kill him. Why not? Poirot asked. Because I wanted him alive, Markovic replied. Alive enough to suffer. Poirot studied him. And yet you were seen near the private salons. Yes, Markovic said. Because I was supposed to meet him. Poirot's eyes sharpened. At midnight. Yes. Did you go inside? No, Markovic said. He never arrived. Poirot nodded slowly. Because he was already there. Markovic's gaze flicked away. You were not alone, Poirot said quietly. Markovic hesitated, then exhaled sharply. Isabella, he said. She came to warn me. The revelation struck like a bell. Poirot found Isabella de Luca seated alone now, her composure fraying. You went to Markovic? Poirot said gently. Yes, she admitted. Sir Julian planned to betray him to give his name to the authorities in exchange for immunity. I couldn't let that happen. So you warned him? Poirot said, double quotes, yes. And then? Poirot pressed. And then I went to find my uncle, she whispered. To beg him to stop. Poirot's voice softened. Did you meet him? She shook her head. No, he was already in the salon. The door was closed. Did you hear anything? She hesitated. I heard voices. Poirot's heart quickened. More than one? Yes, she said. But I could not tell who. Poirot straightened. 2 voices, not one. Inspector Valette joined him moments later. We have identified the sedative, he said. Common, easily obtained. And the gun? Poirot asked. Sir Julian's, Valette replied. No fingerprints besides his own. Poirot smiled faintly. Of course. Valette frowned. You know who did this? I know, Poirot said slowly, that the murderer did not intend to kill Sir Julian. Then why is he dead? Because, Poirot replied, Sir Julian was not the target. Valette stared. That makes no sense. Poirot's eyes moved to the clock again. The gunshot was timed to the new year, he said. To mask sound. To confuse witnesses. To create chaos. Valette's breath caught. You think the killer meant to kill someone else? Yes, Poirot said. And Sir Julian interrupted. At that moment, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A woman collapsed. Poirot recognized her instantly. Madame Lucienne Valois. She lay gasping on the marble floor. Eyes wide with terror, a faint scent of bitter almonds in the air. Poirot knelt beside her. Poison, he murmured. Her lips moved. Not. Ma, she whispered. The glass wasn't mine. Her hand twitched once and fell still. Inspector Valette stared in horror. We have another murder. He? Sighed. Poirot closed Madame Valois' eyes gently. No, he said gravely. We have the same murderer. Part 5. A trap of glass and time. Music had long since stopped. Yet an unnatural hush settled over the casino floor as Madame Lucienne Valois' body was carried away. The glittering chandeliers now felt accusatory, their light too bright, too revealing. Guests whispered in frightened clusters, no longer merely detained, but terrified. 2 deaths in one night. Inspector Valette ran a hand over his face. This is no longer a matter of convenience, Monsieur Poirot. This is a nightmare. Poirot stood very still, his gaze fixed on the champagne glasses lying neatly upon a silver tray nearby. No, he said quietly. It is a design. Valette turned sharply. Design? Yes, Poirot replied. And like all designs, it depends upon timing. The medical officer confirmed Poirot's suspicion within minutes. Madame Valois had been poisoned. The substance was swift, precise, and fatal, administered through champagne. But she drank publicly, Valette argued. Anyone could have tampered with the glass. Poirot shook his head. No, the murderer required certainty. Madame Valois was not meant to die, at least, not until she became dangerous. Valette stared. You believe she was silenced? Indeed, Poirot said. She had begun to speak. Poirot requested all champagne service to cease immediately. The order was obeyed with visible relief. Then he did something unexpected. He asked the guests to remain exactly where they were. "You are going to stage something?" Valette asked suspiciously. Poirot smiled faintly. "I am going to observe." He began again with Isabella de Luca. She looked shattered now, her earlier restraint broken. "2 people are dead," she said hoarsely. "This is my fault." "No," Poirot said gently. "But your silence may yet cost another life." She flinched. "You heard 2 voices in the private salon," Poirot continued. "One was Sir Julian. The other wasn't a man or a woman." She closed her eyes, concentrating. "A woman," she said finally. Soft but controlled. Poirot nodded. "Thank you." Anton Markovic was next. "You were meant to drink champagne with Sir Julian," Poirot said. Double quotes, "Yes," Markovic replied. "A toast." "A lie. And the glass?" Poirot asked. "He poured it himself," Markovic said. Then he stepped away to take a call. Poirot's eyes gleamed, leaving the glass unattended. "Yes," Poirot nodded slowly. Inspector Valette exhaled sharply. "You believe the poison was meant for Markovic?" "Yes," Poirot said. "And when Sir Julian returned unexpectedly, the plan collapsed." Valette frowned. "Then why shoot Sir Julian?" Poirot's voice was calm but firm. "Because the murderer panicked, and because the gun was already there." The revolver. Poirot requested it again, examining it under the light. "Inspector," he said, "did anyone verify whether Sir Julian habitually carried this weapon?" Valette hesitated. "No, but it was registered to him." Poirot smiled sadly. "Registration is not possession." Valette's eyes widened. "You mean the gun was placed," Poirot finished, "just as the champagne was prepared, just as the meeting was arranged." Poirot turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I ask you now to think carefully. At 11:45, someone ensured Sir Julian would be alone. At 11:55, someone prepared a poisoned drink. At midnight, someone fired a gun." He paused. "These are not the actions of many. These but of one." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Poirot's gaze settled on a woman, standing near the rear. She had drawn little attention all evening. Clara Whitcomb, Sir Julian's private secretary. She had arrived late. She had spoken little. She had grieved convincingly. Poirot approached her slowly. "Mademoiselle Whitcomb," he said gently, "you knew Sir Julian better than anyone." She nodded, eyes brimming. "He was difficult and dangerous," Poirot added. She swallowed. "Yes." "You arranged his meetings," Poirot said, "including the one at midnight." She stiffened. "I merely followed instructions," she said. Poirot smiled faintly. "You followed them very well." Inspector Valette stepped closer. "Monsieur Poirot." Poirot raised a hand. "Mademoiselle," he continued, "you knew Madame Valois was frightened. You knew Markovic was angry. You knew Isabella was desperate." Clara's breathing quickened. "You placed the poison for Markovic," Poirot said. "But Sir Julian arrived early. He drank instead." "That is not true," she cried. Poirot tilted his head. "Is it not?" Silence stretched. Then Clara whispered, "He deserved it." Gasps echoed. Valette moved forward, but Poirot stopped him. "Not yet," he said softly, "because the truth is still incomplete." Clara looked up, eyes wild. "You killed Sir Julian," Poirot said, "but you did not intend to kill Madame Valois." She shook her head violently. No, she drank the wrong glass." Poirot's voice hardened. "Because you returned to silence her." The room froze. "You poisoned her when she began destroying documents," Poirot said. "Documents that proved your involvement." Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "I wanted it to end," she cried. "All of it?" Poirot looked at her sadly. "Mademoiselle," he said, "murder is not an ending. It is a beginning of consequences." Inspector Valette signaled to the guards. As Clara Whitcomb was taken away, fireworks exploded faintly over the sea. Celebrations delayed. Joy now hollow. Poirot adjusted his mustache. The new year, he murmured, has begun badly. Asterisk, asterisk part 6. The aftermath of truth, the arrest of Clara. Whitcomb did not bring relief to the Casino de Monte-Carlo. If anything, it deepened the unease. Guests watched in stunned silence as she was led away, her shoulders slumped, her carefully constructed composure finally destroyed. Some looked satisfied. Others looked frightened. A few looked thoughtful. Hercule Poirot belonged firmly to the last category. Inspector Villette exhaled heavily. "It is done," he said. 2 murders. 1 murderer. Poirot did not immediately respond. He gazed instead at the gaming tables, now abandoned. Their green felt strangely mournful. "Is it?" Poirot asked quietly. Villette frowned. "You exposed her." "She confessed." "She confessed to killing Sir Julian," Poirot said. "And to poisoning Madame Valois." "Yes. Then what troubles you?" Poirot turned slowly to face him. "Confessions are not conclusions, Inspector. They are merely statements." Villette stiffened. "You think she lied?" "No," Poirot replied. "I think she told the truth, but not all of it." The remaining guests were finally permitted to retire to their hotels under police supervision. Dawn crept faintly over the Mediterranean, washing Monte Carlo in pale gold. The city looked innocent again, as though nothing terrible had occurred. Appearances, Poirot knew, were always deceptive. He requested to speak once more with Isabella de Luca. She arrived looking exhausted, her eyes shadowed with grief and guilt. "It's over," she said softly. "Isn't it?" Poirot studied her carefully. "Tell me," he said, "did Clara Whitcomb ever speak to you about leaving Sir Julian?" Isabella nodded slowly. "Yes, many times. She was afraid of him." "And you?" Poirot asked. "Were you afraid?" "Yes," Isabella whispered, "but also loyal. He raised me. I owed him." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Loyalty can be a dangerous debt." Isabella looked down. "I should have gone to the police." "Yes," Poirot said. "But then, this would not be a Poirot mystery." She gave a weak, sad smile. Poirot next sought Anton Markovic, who was pacing the terrace like a caged animal. "You are free to go," Poirot told him. Markovic stopped. "Free? 2 people are dead." "Yes," Poirot said. "And you are alive." Markovic's jaw tightened. "She tried to poison me." "Yes," Poirot agreed. "But you also intended to kill Sir Julian eventually." Markovic did not deny it. Poirot leaned closer. "You see, monsieur, had you acted first, Clara Whitcomb would still be alive, and perhaps so would Madame Valois." Markovic's eyes darkened. "Do not preach to me, detective." Poirot straightened. "I do not preach. I observe." Later that morning, Poirot was granted one final interview with Clara Whitcomb herself. She sat in a stark room at the police station, her elegance stripped away, replaced by hollow exhaustion. "You think I didn't plan it," she said bitterly. "That it was all panic." Poirot sat opposite her, folding his hands. "No," he said. "You planned very carefully. But you planned emotionally, not logically." She laughed softly. "What does that mean?" "You hated Sir Julian," Poirot said. "But you also feared him. You wanted him dead, but you wanted his death to look inevitable, like fate." Her eyes flickered. "You used the new year," Poirot continued. "The noise, the chaos, the symbolism. A new beginning." Clara whispered. "He ruined lives." "Yes," Poirot said, "including yours." Silence stretched between them. "And Madame Valois?" Poirot asked quietly. Clara's voice broke. "She saw the papers. She would have destroyed me." "So you destroyed her," Poirot said gently. She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I never meant for there to be 2 bodies." She sobbed. Poirot stood. "Intentions," he said softly, "do not resurrect the dead." That afternoon, Poirot stood alone on the terrace overlooking the sea. The casino behind him had resumed its rhythm money, laughter, illusion. Inspector Villette joined him. "You were right," Villette admitted. "There was more beneath the confession." Poirot smiled faintly. "There always is." Villette hesitated. "You seem troubled." Poirot gazed at the horizon. Because justice was served, but truth was wounded. Villette frowned. What do you mean? Poirot adjusted his mustache. Sir Julian Ashcombe created a web of corruption so vast that removing one spider could not repair it. Clara Whitcomb pulled the trigger, but many others pulled the strings. Villette was silent. Monte Carlo, Poirot continued, will forget this night. It always does. He turned back toward the casino, but I will not. As the sun climbed higher, fireworks debris floated in the harbor, colorful remnants of a celebration that had masked death. Poirot picked up his hat. The new year, he said quietly, begins not with hope, but with responsibility. And with that, Hercule Poirot walked away from the casino, leaving behind the lights, the lies, and the lingering echo of midnight. Part 7. The echoes that remained. The morning newspapers were merciless. Tragedy at Monte Carlo Casino, 2 dead in New Year's night. HORRR photographs of the Casino de Monte-Carlo filled the front pages. Its elegance cruelly contrasted with the grim headlines. Names were printed, fortunes hinted at, motives speculated upon with the enthusiasm only scandal could inspire. Hercule Poirot read them over breakfast, his expression unreadable. Mon Dieu, murmured Georges, pouring the coffee. They make it sound like a melodrama. Poirot folded the paper with care. The public does not desire truth, Georges. It desires a story. And this story is finished, no? Poirot looked out toward the harbor, where the sea lay deceptively calm. No, he said softly. Stories like this do not end. They echo. Later that morning, Isabella de Luca requested to see him. She arrived dressed simply now, the glamour stripped away, replaced by something quieter resolve. Perhaps I am leaving Monte Carlo, she said without preamble. Poirot nodded. That is wise. I have given a full statement, she continued. About my uncle, about the money, everything. Poirot studied her face. And how do you feel? She considered the question carefully. Empty, she said. But lighter. Poirot smiled gently. That is often how truth feels at first. She hesitated. Do you think Clara was evil? Poirot shook his head slowly. No, he said. She was frightened. And fear, when fed long enough, becomes something very close to evil. Isabella swallowed. I should have acted sooner? Yes, Poirot agreed. But regret is the tax we pay for being human. She stood, extending her hand. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. He bowed slightly. Live well, mademoiselle. That is the only apology the dead ever accept. Inspector Villette arrived that afternoon, carrying a thin folder. The authorities in London have confirmed it, he said. Sir Julian Ashcombe was under investigation. Quietly. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Too quietly. Villette sighed. Politics. Always, Poirot murmured. Villette hesitated. There is something else. Clara Whitcomb has withdrawn her confession regarding Madame Valois. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Withdrawn? She claims she poisoned only Sir Julian, Villette said. That Madame Valois' death was coincidence. Poirot shook his head. No coincidence smells of bitter almonds, Inspector. Villette nodded grimly. I know, but without direct evidence. Poirot raised a hand. Justice is not always symmetrical. Sometimes it limps. Villette looked troubled. Does that not anger you? Poirot considered. It saddens me, he said. Anger clouds the little gray cells. That evening, Poirot returned once more to the casino, not to gamble, to observe. The tables were alive again. Laughter rang out. Champagne flowed. The orchestra played as if nothing had happened. Poirot stood near the spot where Sir Julian had fallen. Memory, he knew, was selective. By next week, this would be merely another story told over cocktails. He closed his eyes briefly. 2 deaths, he murmured. And how many saved? A voice behind him answered, At least 1. He turned. Clara Whitcomb stood there in his memory. Not in flesh. Calm. Composed. The woman she had once been. Poirot opened his eyes. The space was empty. He exhaled slowly. Back at the hotel, Poirot wrote a letter he would never send. Justice has been done, though imperfectly. Truth has been spoken, though quietly. And the world, as always, moves on. He sealed the envelope and placed it in his suitcase. On his final morning in Monte Carlo, Poirot stood at the station platform once more. The same elegance, the same promise of escape. Georges adjusted his coat. "Where to next, monsieur?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Somewhere less dazzling," he said. "Where darkness does not wear diamonds." The train began to move. As Monte Carlo slipped away, Poirot reflected on the night that had begun with fireworks and ended with silence. The new year had claimed its due, and Hercule Poirot, servant of truth, carried its weight with him, as he always did. Part 8. The quiet reckoning. The train moved steadily north, carrying Hercule Poirot away from the brilliance of Monte Carlo and toward a landscape less eager to disguise its truths. Snow-dusted hills replaced palm trees. Silence replaced champagne laughter. Poirot welcomed it. Silence, after all, was where reflection lived. He sat alone in his compartment, hands folded neatly over his walking stick, eyes half closed, not sleeping, but thinking. The case, though officially concluded, still arranged itself in his mind like an unfinished puzzle. 2 deaths, 1 confession, and several truths that would never see daylight. Poirot did not delude himself. Justice, in the human sense, was rarely complete. At a small station near the Italian border, a woman boarded the train. Poirot noticed her immediately, not because she was remarkable, but because she was trying very hard not to be. Plain coat, modest hat, eyes that avoided contact. She took the seat opposite him. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then she said quietly, "You do not remember me, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot opened his eyes fully. "On the contrary," he said, "I remember you very well, Mademoiselle Whitcomb." Clara Whitcomb flinched. "You should not be here," Poirot continued calmly. "You are supposed to be in police custody." She gave a hollow smile. "I was released temporarily. Formalities. Lawyers." Poirot said nothing. "I wanted to see you," she said, "before everything becomes official." Poirot inclined his head. "Then speak." Clara clasped her gloved hands together. "They will never prove Madame Valois' murder," she said. "You know that." "Yes," Poirot replied. "I know. And Sir Julian," she continued, "he will be remembered as a victim, not as what he was." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "History is written by survivors." She laughed softly. "Then I suppose I am fortunate." Poirot studied her face. She looked older now, smaller. The fire that had driven her was gone, replaced by resignation. "Do you regret it?" Poirot asked. She considered carefully. "I regret that I became like him," she said. "That I used fear as a weapon." Poirot nodded. "That regret is your sentence." She looked up sharply. "You believe in punishment beyond prison?" "I believe," Poirot said, "in the persistence of conscience." The train rattled on. Clara hesitated, then spoke again. "There is something you do not know," she said. Sir Julian was planning a 3rd betrayal, one that would have destroyed Isabella completely. Poirot's eyes hardened. "And you knew this?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "That is why I acted that night. Not only for myself." Poirot sighed. "Good intentions," he said, "are often the most dangerous accomplices." She bowed her head. "I know." When the train slowed at the next station, Clara stood. "This is where I leave you," she said. Poirot rose as well. She hesitated, then asked, "If you had been in my place, would you have done differently?" Poirot met her gaze steadily. "Yes," he said, "because I would have trusted the law despite its flaws." "You trusted only yourself." She nodded slowly, accepting the judgment. "Goodbye, Monsieur Poirot." "Goodbye, Mademoiselle." She stepped off the train and disappeared into the cold morning air. Poirot returned to his seat, feeling the familiar weight of melancholy. He reached into his pocket and removed a small notebook, his private one. Inside, he wrote a single sentence: "Evil rarely announces itself. It negotiates." He closed the book. That evening, Poirot arrived in a quiet Swiss town. No casino, no orchestra. Just snow, lamplight, and stillness dotted dinner. The innkeeper asked politely, "You are traveling alone, monsieur?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Always," he said. "But never without company." "In what way?" Poirot tapped his temple gently. "The past," he said, "is a very talkative companion." As he retired for the night, Poirot stood by the window. Watching snow fall softly onto the empty street, Monte Carlo felt very far away now. Yet the echo of midnight, the gunshot, the scream, the silence remained, not as a burden, but as a reminder that even beneath the brightest lights, darkness waited patiently. Part 9. The last threads. The following morning in the Swiss town was crisp and clear. Snow crunched underfoot, and the mountains loomed like silent sentinels. Hercule Poirot moved with his usual meticulous pace, appreciating the calm. A welcome contrast to Monte Carlo, where chaos had danced beneath chandeliers. Yet even here, Poirot's mind remained engaged. The case from Monte Carlo had not fully released its hold on him. Clara Whitcomb's confession, partial, truthful, and yet incomplete, continued to turn over in his thoughts. 2 deaths, a poisoned glass, a revolver, secrets, lies. Each thread led inexorably toward human weakness. Poirot spent the morning writing letters to London, detailing the events as he had observed them. Not for the authorities, they already had their reports, but for himself. To preserve the integrity of memory. When he finished, he stepped outside for a walk through the snow. The crisp air sharpened his thoughts. "It is always the small details," he murmured to himself, adjusting his scarf. "The tiniest gesture, the faintest hesitation, reveals more than 1,000 words of confession." He passed the town square and noticed a familiar figure waiting. Isabella de Luca, bundled against the cold, her expression still delicate, haunted by the events of Monte Carlo. She bowed politely as he approached. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I hoped I might speak with you one last time." "Of course," Poirot replied. "Walk with me." The snow is a better confessor than words sometimes. They moved in silence for a few steps, the crunch of snow the only sound. "You must forgive me for everything," Isabella said finally. "For the chaos, for the fear, for what I could not prevent." Poirot studied her carefully. "Mademoiselle, you acted as anyone would have. But courage, real courage, is sometimes quiet. You did what you could." She exhaled slowly. "And Clara Whitcomb?" "She acted to protect you," Poirot said. "Her methods, unwise, dangerous, yet her intent was not malicious toward you. Understand this. Human actions are rarely simple, mademoiselle. They are mixtures of fear, hope, and necessity." Isabella nodded, her eyes glistening. Poirot paused, pointing toward the mountains in the distance. "You see, mademoiselle, justice is a delicate thing. It does not always appear as the law imagines it. Sometimes it is measured in survival, in choices made under pressure, in restraint. And the law?" she asked. "The law," Poirot said, smiling faintly, "will punish what it can. Conscience punishes what it must." They stood silently for several moments, watching the sun glint off the icy peaks. Poirot's gaze softened as he spoke again. "Remember this, mademoiselle. The world forgets the details, but never the consequences." Later that day, Poirot returned to his inn, sat by the window, and reflected on Monte Carlo. Sir Julian Ashcombe, the architect of deception, had orchestrated schemes too large for one person to untangle. Clara Whitcomb had acted violently, yet predictably, given her fear and knowledge. Isabella had been caught in the crossfire of ambition, greed, and loyalty. And yet, no one else had been harmed. Poirot sipped his tea slowly. "Sometimes," he murmured, "one must sacrifice a few pieces to save the whole board." He opened his notebook and wrote another line. "The human heart is both accomplice and witness." Outside, snow continued to fall, silent and indifferent, and Poirot, with his little gray cells alert, knew that every action from Monte Carlo, every whisper, every glance, every hesitation would echo far longer than anyone imagined. Part 10. The final revelation, the final day of Poirot's stay in Switzerland, dawned bright and cold. Snow blanketed the town like a flawless sheet of paper, untouched, unsullied. Yet beneath it lay the secrets of Monte Carlo still festering, still unresolved in subtle ways. Hercule Poirot had spent the morning in quiet contemplation, revisiting every observation in his mind. Every word spoken, every gesture made, every glance exchanged at the Casino de Monte-Carlo that night. Nothing escaped the meticulous scrutiny of his little gray cells. 2 deaths had occurred. Sir Julian Ashcombe, struck by a gun at the stroke of midnight, and Madame Lucienne Valois, poisoned in a moment of desperate miscalculation. One confession had been obtained, Clara Whitcomb, but Poirot knew instinctively that the confession, though truthful in parts, concealed as much as it revealed. The detective understood that the public, the authorities, even the victim's acquaintances would be satisfied with a neatly wrapped explanation. But Poirot himself was never content with appearances. Justice, in its truest form, was intricate, psychological, and painfully precise. Poirot requested a carriage to take him to the outskirts of the town, where a small wooden chapel overlooked the valley below. It was a place removed from noise, from luxury, from distraction. Here, he intended to confront the final truths alone, before they could be clouded by human sentiment or interference. He carried with him a notebook, his pen, and the memory of every moment in Monte Carlo. Sitting by the window, he wrote, "Observation, deduction, and psychology are the tools with which one untangles human folly. The actions of men and women are rarely linear. They are webs, layered, interconnected, and alive." He paused. Then he wrote again, "Tonight, I will reconcile the webs. Tonight, the human conscience will speak louder than any confession." In the early afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Poirot turned to see Isabella de Luca, escorted by the innkeeper, standing hesitantly in the doorway. Her cheeks were pale, her eyes tired. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I wanted to say thank you for understanding, for helping me survive. Mentally, if not entirely physically." Poirot gestured for her to sit. "You are welcome, mademoiselle," he said, "but the final truth is yours to carry. The consequences are not mine to bear, only to reveal." Isabella lowered her gaze. "Do you think Clara Whitcomb will ever admit everything?" Poirot shook his head gently. "No, human pride is stronger than confession. But that is why the little gray cells exist. They do not rely on human compliance. They observe, they deduce, and they illuminate. And what I see now, mademoiselle, is clearer than any statement could ever make it." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he reviewed the sequence of events in Monte Carlo. Sir Julian Ashcombe had arranged a clandestine meeting at midnight, ostensibly with Anton Markovic. Clara Whitcomb, fearing exposure and desperate to protect herself, prepared a poisoned champagne glass intended for Markovic. Sir Julian unexpectedly returned early, consuming the poisoned drink himself. Panic ensued, and in the chaos, Clara fired the revolver, killing Sir Julian, a mixture of panic and premeditation. Madame Valois discovered evidence of Clara's involvement and attempted to destroy it. Clara administered a secondary dose of poison, inadvertently killing Madame Valois. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Each action was logical in isolation, but together, they formed a chain of cause and effect so precise it resembled a clockwork mechanism. Isabella listened in silence, her hands clasped tightly. 2 deaths, 1 confession, and several near misses, Poirot said. Yet there is one final truth that most will never recognize. She looked at him, wide-eyed. The murderer, Poirot continued, acted from fear, yes. But the true architect of the chaos was Sir Julian himself. Every thread, every betrayal, every danger was spun by him. He cultivated loyalty, fear, and ambition alike, and then abandoned them to the hands of others. Without his schemes, none of this would have occurred. Isabella's lips parted. So, it was his fault. In part, Poirot said carefully. But do not mistake causation for absolution. Clara Whitcomb acted. She chose her method. She executed it. But the seed was planted by Ashcombe's manipulations. And the seed grew with the aid of human frailty, greed, and fear. Poirot stood, walking toward the window overlooking the valley below. The sun glinted on the snow. The silence of the mountains, a stark contrast to the nightmarish clamor of the casino. The moral of this story, he said softly, is that evil rarely appears in its pure form. It negotiates. It manipulates. It presents itself as opportunity, as survival, as loyalty. And often, he added, it is cloaked in brilliance. Like the lights of Monte Carlo. Isabella remained silent, contemplating the weight of his words. Poirot returned to his desk and wrote one final note in his notebook. Sir Julian Ashcombe is gone. Clara Whitcomb will answer for her actions. Yet the true lesson lies elsewhere. Human nature, under pressure, is both the weapon and the witness. Fear, greed, ambition, and loyalty are the instruments through which crime and justice are composed. That evening, Poirot sat by the inn's hearth. The fire crackled, the room warm and quiet. He removed his hat, adjusted his mustache meticulously, and allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Monte Carlo had tested the limits of human cunning. 2 lives had been claimed, several more imperiled. And yet, the order had been restored, justice partially satisfied, and the lessons irrevocably engraved in memory. Poirot smiled faintly, thinking of the fireworks that had marked the new year. Now distant and silent. The world, he murmured, will forget the details. But the consequences, they remain. He rose, adjusted his coat, and walked to the window. Beyond the snow, the valley stretched endlessly, quiet, clear, truth, at last unclouded. For Hercule Poirot, the night of New Year's in Monte Carlo was over. But the echoes, the whispers, the lessons, the subtle justice of the little gray cells would remain forever. And